Wanted to take a quick second to record a video response um, to my brother Nick and to Ruth and Maria. I want to say that I completely understand people being fearful of potential violence, particularly when dealing with an unknown factor such as a large influx of refugees. But I think it's important to remember a couple things. One, and this is the first, foremost, and primary thing, we have to remember this before we get to any other part of the conversation. We have to take ownership as a country and as Western civilization, frankly, for the meddling that has been done in Syria, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Pakistan over the past 30 years. ISIS didn't spring forth from nowhere. ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatever you want to call them, they filled the vacuum, and they filled the vacuum that Western civilization created. And whether that is toppling leaders in Iran and causing hardliners to take power, whether that be giving political and vocal support to a civil war that ended up ripping apart a country and creating an even larger vacuum for ISIS to fill, or of course whether it be our failed attempt at rebuilding a nation that we were not prepared to handle. In Iraq, we are directly responsible for a portion, if not a majority, um, of the situation that has created the refugee crisis from Syria. And with that singular thing in mind, it is important both for ourselves and for what we teach our children and for the image we project into the world as the bastion of democracy and freedom and responsibility, that we take responsibility when we have caused a problem. And it's not fair for us to lean on Europe and lean on other Middle Eastern countries and say, do your duty and not assist. Jordan's already taken in millions. Turkey has taken in millions. European nations, as is evidenced recently, have already taken in hundreds of thousands. We have to do our part. And that's the first primary reason. Before we get to any other discussion, we broke it, we bought it to some extent, we have to do our duty. When we take a step beyond that, and again, we shouldn't even have to, but if we do, we should also remember to take rational approaches to this. As the meme that I shared stated, it's one thing to try to say we want to screen refugees very, very aggressively and not allow anyone who even remotely might have a chance of connection to extremism. It's another thing entirely to say we won't take any for the actions of a few. We need to remember these people are also running from ISIS. They are running from these murderers as well. And for us to unilaterally try to keep them out, we are lumping them in with the murderers, which brings me to my third point. Don't let this, as Americans, we can't let this be another Guantanamo Bay. If we become the nation that creates these kinds of problems and feeds these kinds of problems and then refuses to help in the aftermath, where we're really obligated to, all we're doing is we're writing the propaganda for them. If you think ISIS is bad, if you think people are converting at alarming rates now, imagine what happens when suddenly millions of displaced people aren't able to find refuge. Suddenly those who weren't extremists before, who are running from the extremists, start going and thinking to themselves, why do I fight these extremists when in reality everyone else in the world hates me too? At least these people might let me come back and live in my country under their rules. We need to remember that we are our own worst enemy when it comes to creating terrorists and spawning terrorism. So we need to take a moment, take a step back, think logically, think clearly, and remember our responsibilities. And it's scary, and I know that. But as I said before, and as this meme highlights, Americans aren't afraid of violence. If we were, we would have acted 10 years ago when the first major mass shootings started occurring with great frequency. But we didn't. We said that we are okay with the level of danger in our society for something as simple as the freedom to enjoy shooting a firearm or to protect oneself with a firearm. If we're okay with those casualties of our children and our citizens, and those potential casualties still moving into the future without being willing to address any aspect of gun control that is broken, then I think it's the height of hypocrisy for us to cower in fear and use that as our blanket by which we leave millions of people in the wind. And we're better than that, and I think we do ourselves a disservice by succumbing to that fear. So that's my thoughts.